Hi, I'm Pete Clark from the Autism Info Centre. Today we're diving into a topic that's very important. It's about adjusting your communication for autistic adults. So this is all about learning how to understand each other better and how to be understood clearly. It's incredibly important because making some thoughtful changes to the way we talk can bridge the communication gaps and help us build much stronger, more respectful connections. Have you ever felt like you're speaking the exact same language as someone else, but somehow you're completely misunderstanding each other? It happens more often than you might think, especially when neurotypical and autistic people are talking together. So, we're going to look at why that happens, and I'll be sharing some really practical, compassionate ways you can adjust your communication style. We'll cover why these adjustments are needed, and how to change the words you use, and how to handle unspoken body language so we can all connect with a lot more dignity, respect, awareness, and acceptance. Effective communication is actually a partnership. It's not just about one person and another person talking at each other. It's not just about what we say, but how our message is received and understood. So, when you're communicating with an autistic adult, you might find that their brain processes language and non-verbal signals and social cues a bit differently than you do. Neurotypical people have a wonderful opportunity to become better communication partners by making just a few thoughtful and respectful adjustments to their own style. So why do we need to make these changes though? Well, it helps to understand that autistic people frequently process language literally. This means they might take words at their exact literal meaning and they won't automatically guess the hidden social meaning. They can't read between the lines. So, for example, using common figures of speech like thinking outside the box could end up being a bit confusing, especially if there isn't an actual box sitting right there in the room. So processing time is another big factor we need to think about. It can sometimes take longer for an autistic person to process spoken information, especially if they're in a distracting environment or there's lots of noise or activity going on. So it's often the case that their brains simply can't process multiple ideas all at once. And because of that, they might need to sift through ideas and things they've just heard in a methodical way, which naturally takes a little bit longer. They might also need a little bit more time to put together their reply because they have to think everything through and decide, what's appropriate to respond with, what's expected of them. It all takes time to think about. So, maybe allowing an extra 5 seconds before leaping on it and asking the question again, that'll help. Body language and facial expressions are also a bit of a tricky hurdle. A lot of autistic people might not intuitively use or read normal body language or facial expressions or even tone of voice for the full context of a conversation. They might also struggle to use those same physical signals to express their own feelings. What's more, their own non-verbal cues are quite often different from other people's, so it's really easy to misinterpret what they're trying to show you. For example, fidgeting or looking away aren't necessarily signs that they're bored or disinterested or being rude. Those might simply be coping mechanisms to help them handle the discomfort of a social situation. So what you can actually do to make it easier for an autistic person to understand you and also for you to understand them, the first most important thing is you have to be clear and direct and concrete in what you say. Try to avoid ambiguity, hints, and vague language. Get rid of figures of speech, get rid of sarcasm, get rid of idioms, metaphors. These kind of things do not say what they mean and they are confusing. So the language that you use needs to be precise, and that removes the burden of guesswork, which is a huge relief, and it also reduces the amount of time they take to process what you say. So like a vague request at work might be, asking if, can you sort that report for me this afternoon? So now, while most people might understand that finishing the report is urgent, if you're talking to someone who's autistic, it's probably clearer and more exact to say, well, please could you start working on the marketing report that we spoke about this morning? The first step is to gather sales data and I need it by 3 p.m. tomorrow. That's clear, concise, and literal. It gives exact instructions. It's much more helpful than saying just sort it. The same logic applies at home. So like a vague request might be saying, this room is a mess, hoping that they'll infer somehow that you wanted it cleaned up. A clearer and much kinder way of saying this might be something like, please could you put those books back on the shelf and put the cushions back on the sofa, then vacuum the floor. It's, again, all about being literal and direct. You should definitely try to avoid unexplained figurative language, which is a fancy way of saying idioms, common phrases that don't really mean what they say. What's the harm in a common phrase like, well, let's play it by ear? Well, for a literal thinker, this is genuinely confusing. It creates unnecessary anxiety about what's actually going to happen. So idioms, metaphor, and sarcasm all rely on an assumed shared understanding that actually might not be present in their minds. If you do use those, be prepared to explain yourself afterwards. Be prepared to be a little bit humorous with it. It's not a criticism of them that they don't understand these things, it's just how they are. It's also incredibly helpful to be absolutely explicit about social expectations. Many social rules for your entire life go completely unspoken, which can be a total minefield for autistic people who genuinely don't ever learn these things. It can be a great kindness to state your expectations clearly and simply in advance. It's not patronizing, it's just providing helpful clarity. So, for example, to avoid confusion and anxiety about an upcoming work meeting, you might say that you'll do about half an hour of general chat before starting the main agenda items at 10:30 a.m. That gives them an idea of what to expect and the kind of timetable they're working with. Another great strategy is learning to embrace the pause to allow processing time. When you ask a question, consciously allow for a pause. There might not be a pause, but if you allow for it and you don't allow yourself to feel awkward about it, then it works a lot better. What you do have to do is resist the urge to fill that silence by rephrasing the question or asking, did you hear me? This silence is not a sign of ignorance or disinterest, it is vital thinking time. By waiting patiently, you show proper respect for the person's processing needs and you're much likely to get a better, considered response. So practicing active listening is another beautiful way to show respect and to ensure that you truly understand them. Active listening means you're fully concentrating on what's being said rather than just passively hearing the words while you plan your own response. The first step is to give them your full attention, which means putting your phone away and giving them your undivided attention. The second step is to show you're actually listening to what they say, not just listening to the words. You might use small verbal cues to encourage them, like, yes, I understand, or okay, that's fine, just to show that you're engaged, but be careful not to interrupt their flow too much. And the third step is to reflect and clarify what's been said by paraphrasing it back to them. Again, this works in reverse. If you're not sure that they've understood you, you can ask them to clarify what they think they've just heard when you were speaking. This basically shows a new level of understanding, and it gives them a chance to correct anything that you or they have misunderstood. It gives them a chance to ask extra questions which might be vital. So again, give them a little time to process what you've said and to respond. So, for example, if an autistic person tells you they can't go to a party because the music will be too loud and they don't know many people, you might respond by checking how understanding you are. You could ask if it's the loud music and unfamiliar people that make it overwhelming, rather than them not wanting to see you. You could also follow up with kind questions like, would it be better if I could find you a quiet room where you can rest if things get a bit too overwhelming? This shows that you've heard them, it shows you've understood them, and it shows you're responding positively to their concerns and their needs. We should also mention at this point that written communication, such as emails or text messages, are generally much less stressful for autistic people because it removes the pressure of an immediate response and it takes away the need to interpret non-verbal cues. So, to make your writing more accessible, try to use a clear subject line, state the main point at the beginning, and keep your sentences short and focused. Again, avoid the unclear phrases and the idioms and the sarcasm and the usual things. Now let's take a quick look at what is possibly the most misunderstood part of communication with autistic people, which is non-verbal communication. That's not necessarily not speaking, but the thing is, non-verbal is supposed to be a two-way thing. So in a typical conversation, we send and receive a constant stream of unspoken information through our tone, through our face, and through our body language. So for many autistic people, this particular unspoken channel can be quite challenging to process and use. Understanding these differences and adjusting your own signals can be one of the most supportive things you ever do for them. So basically, the social system for automatically producing and reading nonverbal cues can work very differently in autistic people compared to neurotypical people. It's essential not to make assumptions based on your own expectations. So take eye contact, for example. For many autistic people, being expected to make direct, sustained eye contact can actually be intensely uncomfortable or distracting or even physically painful, believe it or not. Looking away, therefore, is not a sign of dishonesty or disinterest or being rude. In fact, an autistic person might be listening much more intently precisely because they aren't spending all their precious mental energy on the overwhelming task of maintaining eye contact. Practically speaking, you should just accept whatever level of eye contact they offer and never comment on it and never ask for more. You'll also notice that an autistic person's facial expressions or tone of voice might not always seem to match what they're feeling inside or what they're trying to express. They might have a neutral or flat expression even when they're very happy, excited, or anxious. Their tone of voice might sound a bit monotonous regardless of the topic. Think of it this way. Their emotional volume knob might be turned all the way up on the inside, but the external speaker is set to low. So you should always trust their actual words above your own interpretation of their body language, their facial features, their tone of voice. If they say they're excited about a project, but they don't look excited, absolutely believe the words, not the body language. An autistic person's body language might also seem a bit closed off, such as crossing legs, folding arms, or even turning away. This is often just a way of feeling more physically contained and secure. It isn't a sign of unfriendliness, and it's certainly not a sign that they're lying about something. It's not a sign that they're angry either. Some people think that. Their sense of personal space might be different to yours. So they might stand closer or further away than is perhaps normal. You should always respect their posture and physical space and avoid trying to interpret their body language through your neurotypical lens. But what about your own nonverbal communication? Should you just try to act like a robot? Not at all. But what you can do is you can make your own non-verbal signals clearer and perhaps less overwhelming. You can make your gestures clear and purposeful rather than random, as we tend to do in conversations. Complex or overly animated gestures can be very distracting, but simple, clear gestures that support what you're saying are very helpful. For example, if you're giving directions, physically pointing the way as you speak reinforces your verbal message. Try to match your face and your tone to your words. If you're giving praise, a genuine smile and a warm tone will probably help the positive message land more clearly. If you're discussing a serious topic, a calm, neutral tone is much more effective than one loaded with confusing emotion that the person has to try to decode. This massively reduces the thinking involved, the cognitive load of deciphering all these mixed signals. You must also be quite mindful of proximity and touch. Be conscious of personal space and avoid standing too close, which can feel intimidating. Most crucially, please never touch an autistic person unexpectedly, not even with a reassuring intention. A sudden hand on the shoulder and arm can be a sensory jarring thing. It can be very distressing for a person with tactile sensitivities. If you feel a touch is appropriate, ask first. It doesn't take a second. Just ask. Finally, one of the most powerful verbal strategies you can use is to turn your words into something visual. This makes brilliant use of the visual processing strengths that many autistic people have. For example, in a meeting you might say, "That's a great point. Let me write that down as a key action so we don't forget it." Then immediately write it where they can see it being written. Or if you're trying to explain how a machine works, you might use visuals to illustrate rather than relying on words alone. Perhaps a quick demonstration of how things work. Perhaps draw a quick diagram to show how it works. So by being a bit more conscious and deliberate in your non-verbal communication, you reduce the chances again of misunderstanding, and you help create a more comfortable, more predictable place for them to be. Adjusting your communication style is then a wonderful and practical act of respect. It acknowledges neurological diversity. It isn't about dumbing down your language at all, but just about making it clearer and a bit more precise. If you're patient and direct and explicit and you're an active listener, you will reduce those misunderstandings, but more importantly, you'll reduce the amount of anxiety they feel, and you'll build stronger, more effective and more genuine connections with the autistic adults in your life. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe now on YouTube and follow Autism Info Centre on social media, or visit autisminfocenter.org for free autism news, articles, books, videos, podcasts, resources and courses. See you in the next video.